Welcome back to Lower Decks. Today's episode gets back on the business as usual of the Cerritos. In this case, the controlled implosion of a moon in order to save a civilization. Unfortunately, the civilization seems to have a problem with that, for many different reasons.
All the moons we pray to, that's one of the most important!
The only prayer I would ever say to a moon is, please don't be a giant egg, because that would make a really crappy episode of Doctor Who. So while they're seeing to the diplomatic issues around, let us save you from your dumbass selves, Boimler is celebrating a chance to see his new girlfriend, Barbara, who met up with him a month ago. Except Mariner suspects Barbara is either imaginary, or possibly a case of, I'll be on the holodeck for the next 10 minutes if anyone needs me. As far as Tendi and Rutherford go, though...
You know, Kula told me the Vancouver has fluidic processors that self-replicate their own silicas.
Does that mean they have breast implants? Probably not. Still, I'm sure Boimler will spend the next 10 minutes in the holodeck just to be sure. So they arrive at the Vancouver, a top-of-the-line ship where Barbara is supposed to be, and it turns out, actually is, in the flesh. As in an actual flesh and blood person, and not a projection of light, force fields, and a carefully balanced friction algorithm. Mariner isn't sure how to handle this, but definitely not with acceptance and support like a normal frickin' human being would. This is the point where I'll have to tell you why we skipped the first 2 episodes of this series. Mariner and Boimler's relationship as shipmates is frequently unhealthy, bordering on toxic, bordering on radioactive. After finishing episode 2, I was like, wow, this is tedious and uncomfortable, if not cluelessly cruel. Episode 3 fixed that with the important strategy of barely putting them in the same scene together at the best of times. And so because of that, each episode seemed much better simply because they weren't spending any time with each other to get on my frickin' nerves. But what those episodes showed me was that it wasn't that I had a problem with either of the characters exactly, it was just that I didn't like the way they meshed. At all, because they meshed like a knife and a damp plate, screeching irritably. Well, here, Mariner are running their storylines together, but it has toned that down a bit. They're still the same people, so for example, Mariner is being a tool here, but that's part of her character, because, you see, she's an asshole. And Boimler is being Boimler. The reason he has chosen it in this particular situation is because...
Source Rex!
Jet?
Get up here! We're gonna be working together!
Yeah, I mean, in the face of that, even the most slightly insecure guy is going to be nervous with a tall, muscular problem solver around. All we need now is for him to say that he uses his enormous wealth to care for sick puppies and kittens, and this relationship might as well just say end program. But don't worry, Barb insists that Jet is just her ex. They broke up amicably, and there's nothing to worry about. Except... Mariner thinks there is something to worry about. Not for Boimler getting his heart broken, though. Don't worry about that. And not that she wouldn't care about that. Of course, she would care deeply if he were heartbroken. She just needs him to realize that no woman would ever voluntarily want to mate with him. So it's a wonder that he's not grabbing onto this plan more quickly. Boimler doesn't seem to get it, but nevertheless, there is a whiff of evil around here. Some kind of evil scheme of... well, evil. Now, granted, it doesn't have to be that. Evil diversifies its portfolio. In other news, Tendi and Rutherford begin their B-plot, using the new T-88s, which I have a sneaking suspicion is named after the epoxy. The chief engineer of the Vancouver hooks them up. Now they can work on making sure the simulations will be perfect for work on either the mission or on alternatives to imploding the moon. Seems the locals are all still butthurt all over that. But it doesn't matter because they're competing for the chance to bring it home with them. Sorry, I was still referring to Tendi and Rutherford and the... No one's bringing a moon home with them. Well, not on purpose anyway. The captain is going to have to come up with a solution to satisfy the locals, so she's got it. She's going to get the tides sorted out, ancestral homes will be relocated to the next moon, so technically it will still be on the same moon because of the whole numbering thing. They're going to keep a bunch of the moon dust together so that the locals can pray at it if they want to. It pretty much seems to have solved all the problems, except possibly for the werewolves, but they'll just need to deal with that shit on their own. Well, alas, there is one person who is still not happy, the representatives of the Reds, I guess, because he says that moon blocks pollution and all those on his moon will die if it is removed. I'll be honest, if it's not one thing or another with these yokels, this is as close as I have ever become to being sympathetic to the "we're just washing our hands of it" take on the Prime Directive. After a bit of cringe from both Boimler and Mariner during the important mission planning, she returns to her crazy board to attempt to figure out what she's missing, besides faith in humanity, I mean. Boimler, for his part, has decided the way to save his relationship is to become the coolest guy ever. And so naturally he asks the computer to figure out how to do that for him. Yep, that is an outfit that has been picked out entirely by an algorithm scraping the internet. Honestly, I'm shocked that there are not AirPods and a face mask that are both in the color scheme of the Ukrainian flag. Well, it may shock you to learn that Boimler proceeds to embarrass, humiliate, and just generally bring shame on generations of his family, and then Mariner swipes some of Barbara's hair.
Hey, good news, maybe bad news. I am like 99.8% sure she's a reptoid.
Oh my God, to hear you use that word in this day and age. Shameful. In the battle of who looks like the bigger tool, Mariner seems to be ahead. But Boimler's ongoing jealousy and jumping to the wrong conclusions is giving him a chance to more than catch up. I'd say that he's got this. Oh, but Mariner has pulled away from the pack. She has gone all the way down. She has crossed the tape. It is over. The crowd is chanting her name. Douchebag! Douchebag! Boimler has recovered and accepted that Barbara is not into Jet and is into him, so he's taken it down to his ground state of Boimler. And they're off to one of the platforms to begin preparing for the implosion. You can read whatever you want into that. But when Mariner finds a husk, oh, that's all the proof that she needs. To convince herself she finally has some proof to justify her insane behavior. Speaking of complete tools, Rutherford and Tendi are fighting over who gets the chance to keep one of those nifty T-88s from the chief engineer. Well, it turns out that it's not bringing one back. It's being able to use one because you're going to be transferred over here to the Vancouver. And really, who wouldn't want to be on this ship?
Bradward! Bradward! Bradward, wait!
Okay, besides her. She arrives on the platform only to find, yes, the worst has happened. Boimler is buck naked. In the midst of an argument, Boimler gets knocked out because the platform is unstable. She didn't throw a socket wrench at him. Well, not this time anyway. Barbara sees the state of things, though, and then attacks Mariner, who fights back to protect Boimler against Barbara, who fights to protect Boimler from Mariner. So that's awkward. They finally realize that neither is the parasite. They're both perfectly normal human beings. Biologically speaking, anyway. Tendi and Rutherford think about the transfer and decide, no, they don't want to do it. Working on the Cerritos gives them a purpose. Keeping it running, hanging out with their friends. No little T-88 is worth losing all of that. So they go to the chief engineer to let him know, thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to go. We may have to do a little persuasion, though.
Hey, you can't do that! Don't kick my pad! That's an order!
While they attend to that, the captain finally gets to the bottom of the last alien holdout. Turns out he's just a Space Bezos who owns the moon and he doesn't want to have to move his house. So it's full speed ahead with the implosion. As for the chief engineer, he can't handle the stress. I mean, imagine the way things always were for Geordi, all of the crap that he had to put up with. Basically, that's what this guy has to deal with, only without an android pal to make it fun. So, in return for their silence about phasering Rutherford on accident, the transfer gets canceled, and they each get a free T-88 to take home with them. Thanks for playing. And, well, the big surprise of the episode finally happens. Turns out there was a parasite the whole time. But it's not in either of the ladies, it's in Boimler's head. It made him irresistible. And now that it's gone, well, despite assurances, Barbara breaks up with him anyway. So, the end. Cupid's errant arrow has some good to it, but the problem is, I really don't personally care for cringe comedy. And I really don't like seeing people jerked around emotionally, even in a comedy. I mean, it wasn't as serious as we sometimes get in works, but nevertheless, when these things happen, it just feels mean-spirited. The episode certainly plays around with Star Trek's own tropes, but the one that is played straight in this is the whole soulmate of the week idea. We have a romantic interest for exactly one episode, then the character's heart is broken, and then we just move on. I really don't like doomed relationships. I mean, the positive of the episode is that at least we see that despite being an asshole, Mariner's ultimately committed to her friendship with Boimler, even if that is a rather unhealthy friendship. The episode itself is well-paced, and it's not that bad. It's just that it's just got room for improvement, especially where that relationship comes in.